Good evening, everyone. Thank you for attending our forum. My name is Eric Tracy. I'm the superintendent of schools and happy to have you here. We've been really trying to figure out ways to connect with the community on this project to start to help people to understand where we've been, where we are, and then where we're going. So you'll get to see that this evening. And this is really all about the elementary school project from back when we took the vote to begin the process in the last town meeting, all the way through now. So you'll get some insight from people that, I think I shut it off myself. People that have been involved with us. Our architectural team is here tonight. They will be speaking, different people from that group. Also, our owner's project manager is here and will be also picking up pieces of the presentation tonight. So we'll go through the whole presentation and then we'll take questions at the end of it. It's really, there's a lot of information coming at you. We'll post this once we're done on the website so that you have access to it, but there's also all kinds of other interesting information on the website. Tonight we're going to do some team introductions. We'll get everybody introduced and have each of the teams go through their teams. We'll talk about the process, the MSB process, each of the modules. There are a number of modules. We are partway through module 3, which we'll talk about a little bit further into the project. And then we'll talk about the timeline and some of the milestones, some that we've already hit, some that we need to reach. This is a very prescriptive process. The MSBA is very willing to grant you a percentage of the money as long as you follow the kind of stay within the boundaries of the program. We'll do the evaluation. We'll walk through how we've been evaluating the existing conditions, including the examination of any available plot of land in both Hamilton and Wenham of a specific size. So there's been a lot of work in that area. Talk a little bit about the community outreach that we've done and that we'll continue to do. We'll do a little design team update, which will show some of the pieces, some of the options, the 15 options that we're currently looking at, and then tell you a little bit about our next steps. Then we'll take some questions about the project itself and really do the best we can answering questions. You have a flyer in front of you that gives you a little bit of insight. We'll give you a little more info within the presentation to help you to translate that document, but without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to our OPM, Matt here, who's, yeah. Oh yeah, this is my fault. The school building committee, this is the group of people who have volunteered their time, really for the next 5 years. They have given up a month, at least one meeting a month, and some months they're doing 2 meetings. So these are the people who are currently on the school building committee for the Hamilton Wenham Elementary School project, and I want to thank all of them for their time and their expertise. We have a fairly strong team of people, not only within the school district, but a number of people who are parents and community members who have expertise in engineering, contract design, and architectural design, things like that. So that's been helpful for the team as well. Now I'll hand it off to Matt.
Thank you. Oh, you already want one. All right. We'll do a quick introduction of the teams. My name is Matthew Galino. I am with PMA Consultants, who is your OPM or Owner's Project Manager. Other members of the PMA team that aren't here tonight are Christopher Carroll, he's our Executive Director, and Tim Cheney and Deborah Scher, both are acting project managers on the project as well. Here tonight, do you want to introduce yourself? This is Kevin Nigro, our Managing Director. Been with PMA for over 25 years now. 20. And then Nick Massey with PMA as well. And Pete, I'll let you introduce JCJ.
Okay, so I'm Peter Morgan. I'm a senior project designer at JCJ Architecture. I've been there for 5 years, and I'm leading the design portion of this effort, and I'll pass this off to Alicia.
Evening, everybody. Thanks for joining us. I'm Alicia Caratano, the project manager for JCJ Architecture. Go ahead, Mike.
Hi, everybody. I'm Mike Perlo. I'm an educational planner and programmer with MLP Integrated Design, working with the design team of the district.
My name's Doug Roberts. I'm the principal in charge with JCJ Architecture. Also with us tonight, because I already had my steps in, On the other end, bookending, is Jim LaPasta. He is our Chief Architectural Officer and focusing on community outreach. Back to Matt.
All right, before we get into some of the details on what the design team has been working on over the last few months, we wanted to give a quick overview of the MSBA process. So the District of Hamilton-Wenham submitted or have been submitting statements of interest or SOIs to the MSBA dating as far back as 2008. In 2001 were the most recent statements of interest that were submitted for all 3 elementary schools. Cutler was selected by the MSBA as the school in the most need, so that is the project that we were designated from the MSBA to study and proceed with. Once the district is invited into the program, they select a team, which is the team that you have in front of us. First, an owner's project manager is selected, and then a designer is brought on board to kind of get things going. That occurred in August is really when the full team was brought on board. So really it's been just the later half of 2023 that we've been involved with the community. We're currently in the feasibility study. This is kind of the information gathering phase, as we like to call it. The feasibility study consists of 2 major submissions within the feasibility, which is the preliminary design program and preferred schematic report. These are, like I said, kind of the information gathering phases of the project and what we are currently working on. Now, what do those entail for each of the phases? The preliminary design program is really the first process that we, as a project team, get into. We look at the existing conditions of the Cutler Elementary School, again, since that was the school that the MSBA selected as the most in need. So we go through a lot of review of what the existing conditions look like. We are tasked with looking at all other parcels of land in both Hamilton and in Wenham to determine whether or not there are any other areas or parcels where a school could be built. We'll get into a little bit of that as we look through some of the design aspects. And then we also have to update the educational program, and that's really working very closely with Eric and the educators within the district. And Mike Perillo will touch base on that and get into a bit more detail on that. The educational program is really what drives the entire process. It is what the building is designed around. So the educational plan is really kind of what dictates how the building will operate. It determines how many rooms you need, and so on and so forth. So it's a very critical document. That's a big part of what the PDP phase is about, and getting that completed. That also feeds into what we call a space summary, which is populating essentially the square foot of the building based on the number of classrooms that you need, gymnasium, cafeteria, really all the spaces that you will have in an elementary school building. Once we get that together, we'll put some pretty preliminary designs together. Really, it's just a square foot graphic of how big the building would look. There's no real design per se that shows what the rooms will look like. It's really boxes on paper that just shows us how big the school will look, what the square footage is based on the space summary design, and then from there we go into a cost analysis of the different options that we have based on the square footage. So that's really where we are right now. We will be submitting the preliminary design program to the MSBA at the end of January. So we're still in the very early phases of the project. You'll see throughout this presentation how many different options we're still currently reviewing. And once we get the PDP submitted to the MSBA, they will review, issue comments back to the team. We'll reply to the comments. Typically at this phase in the project, they're fairly minor comments. Again, there's no drawings to be reviewed or anything like that. But after they do review, we'll jump into the preferred schematic report. And this is where we just start to narrow down the options. Right now we have 15. We'll start to narrow down what options make the most sense. During this phase, we still need to submit pretty much one of each option, a renovation, an ad reno, and a new build with one of the options as the preferred option. And that is the option that would be recommended to be pushed forward. During the PSR, as we kind of whittle down towards a preferred option, we'll go through a similar process that we do in the preliminary design program, updating design a little bit more. We'll do another estimate. If we need to get into any value engineering, which is essentially removing design from the building if we think it's going to be too expensive, that's a much more robust process in the next phase. But if we see the need to value engineer some stuff out, we can. And we'll start to look at, really getting into some more of the systems that will be in the building. Are we going to go for some net zero options? If it's not full net zero, can we implement some? We'll start to kind of get into what the actual systems in the building will start to look like, and that will help dictate what the latest design and cost options are. After the PSR, we'll get into schematic design. This is really when the design starts to become more robust. This is when drawings actually start to take form. This is where estimates really start to get dialed down. This is when we present what's called the MSBA 3011 form, which is essentially the MSBA's prescribed budget. This is how they determine what is considered an eligible cost for reimbursement. And we'll go into that a little bit later. But this is the real kind of critical phase, and this is right before residents will have a chance to vote for the project. So this all occurs, and this is really when the project will take its form on what the preferred option is, what we're seeing for cost. We'll know what the MSBA's reimbursement will be, so all that information will be made available at the end of schematic design, right before we get into a townwide vote. Just to touch base on overall schedule, these are some pretty key dates of things that are up and coming. Obviously, we're at the community forum Q&A number 1. We will have another one next week as well. We'll be submitting the PDP to the MSBA at the end of the month, and then we'll get into the preferred schematic report, like I had mentioned, and kind of just flow through each of the modules at the MSBA right into schematic design. And like I said, at the end of schematic is when we have the residents' town meeting on April 5th, 2025. That's the town meeting we're anticipating to hold the first vote at, and then it's followed by an actual ballot vote, I think the Saturday following that town meeting on the 5th. So that's kind of big picture on where we are. I'm not going to get into any of the construction timeline at the moment. If we have questions at the end, we can get into it. Again, we're pretty far away from knowing what is actually going to be built. That is something that we do not know. So if there are questions about some of the stuff after schematic design and town vote, we'll be happy to answer them. But just for the sake of time, I don't want to dive too deep into that tonight. Nick, you want to just give a quick update on community outreach?
Thank you. Next slide is just the right arrows. Perfect. Thank you. How you doing, everyone? Nick Massey. Nice to see a lot of folks actually that we saw at some visioning sessions, some community outreach as well. So great to see a lot of you again. Again, this is just a project timeline to the dates that really matter to you folks on what's coming up. Bulk of my work here is the community outreach. Committee had their first SBC meeting back in January. And so we've had, since JCJ and PMA have been brought on board, we've had 8 since. So this committee has been working for quite some time. Mike Perillo did a great job with hosting 5 educational visioning workshops, as well as a couple of program verification meetings with the district. September 29th was really our first community outreach event as far as going out to the community. We went out to the farmers market on the 29th and October 6th. That was a good time. We might not have got all the best food there. It was at the end of the season, but it was good nonetheless. Since then, we've been at your ski and skate sales. We've been at your holiday boutiques. We met with the Winthrop School Council. So all great meetings. getting to meet the district and the community. This is pictures of us. If you didn't believe me, here they are. So we kind of set up a spot at each event. It went really well. We got a lot of good conversations with it. A lot of people interested where we were at the process. And we really, what we're doing at most of these events was informing you of the process and how we get there and what it's all about. There's a lot of details within the process that your average Joe may not know. And so that's what we're here to do, is help you guys understand the process. I'm going to kick it over to Director of Facilities and Operations, Tom Gary.
Good evening, folks. Thanks for coming out. This slide here details in a summary, I should say, of what was submitted in the statement of interest, which is basically the application for the MSBA process. All of the items listed within the statement of interest have been confirmed by engineers and designers over the last few months as part of the feasibility study. The top issues are the building is past its useful life. And I don't mean to say that to anybody who was born in 1954, but as it translates to buildings, it is well past its useful life. What we're looking at through this project is a school that will last another 50 years. Major concerns for the Cutler School is accessibility for all students. If anybody has been through the Cutler School, they know that there are a bunch of different elevations throughout the building. Handicap ramps that cut through classrooms in order to gain access to temporary modular structures that were built back in the late 50s, early 60s. We're at capacity when it comes to electrical. We have failing mechanical systems. In fact, we lost a boiler at the end of the heating season last year and had to put in a replacement boiler in this summer just to be able to heat the school. So I can't say strongly enough how much the district needs this project in order to continue education at the Cutler School.
Thank you. Hi again, everybody. So as Nick was saying, we had 5 visioning sessions. Just to give you a little bit of background, I'm an educational planner and consultant working with the design team, but I actually was a teacher for nearly 20 years, mostly actually in neighboring Newburyport. So you're going to see when I talk about the educational visioning and programming process that we went through, it's really heavily based in education, child development, what research says about child development, and then its impact on school design. So you can see the dates there. In early fall, we had about 5 visioning sessions and programming verification meetings as well. What that means is we went and took deeper dives into what is the educational experience, what programs are needed to support that, how do programs interact with one another, and then how will that start to shape the design of the building over the next few months. We also did something called observation immersion, where the design team, members of the school, members of the community, we went out and actually toured schools that have been built recently around the area, some on the North Shore, some toward Boston, and then we also spent the day, the design team and I, touring the existing Cutler and Winthrop to really see the nuts and bolts of what's happening in the building, not just the facility and the pinch points there, but really the education. What are the students and teachers trying to achieve? What special education programs are out there, and then how can we support that? So as I said, the work that I led really was heavily focused in child development. I truly meant that. So the first visioning session we had, there was over 40 participants. They were educators, students, community members, teachers, in and out throughout those different sessions. And most of them were with us throughout the whole process because each session built on top of one another. So we started with child development, talking about physical, academic, social, emotional, developmental traits and how those inform and shape education, teaching and learning, and then the building design. You can see one of the outcomes there. Each group focused on research based on different grade levels and different age ranges within each grade level. And again, we talked about the traits and then how that impacts the learning environment. One of the real reasons, and I start child development with every visioning session, but why it's really important with this particular project is because this project includes options that study different enrollment scenarios, different grade groupings. And so we really took a deep dive and said, what happens if it's just a 3 through 5 school? What happens if it's a K through 5 or 1 through 5 or whatever? Because different ages and bringing them together, how can we support those ranges? How can we bring students together and create community? Because that's one of the things that kept coming up again and again and again when we talked about the vision of what education was going to be. A part of the conversation about child development and enrollment scenarios was also really looking at research about pros and cons of different grade configurations and different school sizes. Research obviously shows us that smaller student-teacher ratios, I can speak firsthand to that because I had nice small class sizes in Newburyport, that makes a huge difference because you get that more personalized learning and personalized instruction. And so some of the small school advantages are, you have that real close-knit elementary community. That's why everybody loves those neighborhood schools. You have increased cross-teacher collaboration, and you also have parent connections to the school. Some of the larger school advantages, again, you actually bring in more close-knit elementary community because as you go up in the different age ranges, all of a sudden your best friend that's on your soccer team may not be at the same school or vice versa. And so you start to bring the community together more by bringing those students together. You also have more diverse, greater opportunities and equity, allowing different programs and different teachers to all come into one space. So now all of a sudden, teachers aren't spread so thin going to multiple schools. Special education teachers aren't going to multiple schools. So now you actually have the opportunity for people to be in one building full time and really support students more. So I'm going to be honest, I'll stand up here and say, research has many pros and cons to small schools, larger schools, and the research continues to change and fluctuates, really depend on where you look and what it says and, who's writing the different articles. But what's important and why we bring this up here is because no matter what decision is made, no matter what enrollment scenario we go with, no matter what school size we go with, the research about child development and these advantages are really things that we want to apply to the educational program no matter what. These things apply to the vision no matter what. So part of our process was identifying overarching goals and priorities. So we asked teachers and community members, what matters most to you about elementary education and teaching and learning and child development? And so these are the things that rose to the top when we did a Post-it note activity like you can see in the image there. So intentional outdoor space. Hamilton Wenham is a beautiful community, has beautiful lands, and so to take advantage of that and do some indoor-outdoor work, because research also shows more outdoor experiences improve social emotional health. Creating small learning communities. And small learning communities simply means an organization where, when we went to school, we had classrooms on both sides of a really long hallway, and that hallway went forever, and you never really saw each other. But instead, now, designs are created where you have classrooms organized in clusters, and students can spill out from those classrooms within this cluster and share space to do breakout activities, do interdisciplinary activities, work in small groups, larger groups as needed. Flexibility to really support all learners, learning styles, spaces and programs to meet the needs of today, but also knowing that this building will be a 50, 60, 70-year building, so how can the building shift and expand and change over time? And then really having this project be this preserving, bridging opportunity to create more community. Not only educational community, but larger Hamilton Wenham community. Academics and social emotional being the foundation, and then creating a sustainable facility, and that facility also serving as a learning tool. We also did a lot of focus on teaching and learning. We talked about what is learning. We created definitions of learning. We talked about what programs and procedures we want to bring to the new school. And we also developed guiding principles based in education. So these are the top ones that rose to the list. So again, creating community. This came up again and again and again. This sense of community, no matter what design enrollment, bringing kids of even different grade levels together, bringing classrooms of different grade levels near each other to really bridge some mentorship between younger students and older students. intergenerational opportunities, peer connections, creating a sense of belonging. The integration of play. The more and more rigor that's put into education and state standards and all that, we've lost play, we've lost discovery, we've lost creativity. And so bringing a lot of that back in, but also maintaining rigor. Student choice, agency. Again, bringing the inside out and outside in. You saw that in the slide before. And then even the flexibility with who and where students work, have more choice and agency. And then finally, the last step was taking all of that information and outcomes about child development and teaching and learning, and then how does that information shape the learning environment? And so the last step that stakeholders took was to develop guiding design principles. So again, organizing the building into small learning communities, really breaking down the building into areas where students can gather and work together, teachers can collaborate, and so can students. Having adaptability and flexibility over time to really grow with the building. Curiosity, sensory experiences and play, indoor-outdoor connectedness, a sustainable building as a learning tool, and really celebrating and honoring student work, not just in traditional display cases, but we've even talked about how can parents and community members come into the building and actually see learning happen, and parents and community members becoming part of that learning process. So what happens is we took all of the outcomes from all of those sessions, the programming meetings, the school tours, and then the school district, the design team, and we worked to develop what's called the educational program document. It's a requirement by the MSBA that identifies every single piece and part of the program that will be put into the new school. And it also asks you to document the visioning sessions and just the overall vision for what education is going to be in the future. And that document, Eric is going to talk about briefly.
Thank you, Mike. You can see a graphic of the educational plan up front. It is really the driving force behind this entire project. It's about an 80-page document that's available on the website, on the school building website. It really lays out all of the parts and pieces of what you have now, what we have now or don't have, versus what we'd like to have or what we vision for the future. So taking these 5 visioning sessions and taking all of that information, taking the information we know about our own community and figuring out ways to investigate all of these different options for educating our children. And when you start to look at the list, we're looking at driven by what the elementary learner is about. And Mike said through his visioning sessions, we literally had these grade level pamphlets that we worked with in groups and tried to take, this is what a first grader is like. This is what it's like to be, a first grader. This is what it's like to be a second grader. How do you now integrate these realities of childhood into the building of your facility and the creation of your classrooms? And then grade configurations, there are 4 scenarios. Those 4 scenarios have expanded into 15 different options right now that are on the table. So when you start to say, well, which way are you going to go? Are you going to go the small or big or this? We don't know. We have no idea. The educational plan is driving what's going to happen inside that building no matter what we choose. If we choose a single small school, that educational plan still drives what the inside of that classroom looks like. Some of the pictures you saw, just as Mike was presenting, are local schools that have been built and that have some of those opportunities built in. This right here is the Manchester Essex Elementary School, and that's a hallway outside of classrooms where kids can spill out of the classroom. This one here is, on the bottom is Danvers, and they have it set up in smaller learning communities with a lot of opportunity for activity outside the classroom. Education is different than when you and I went to school. It is very different. Children are different. The changes and the options that kids have in their lives now are very different than we went in school. We also have a lot more opportunity to bring services in to the building. So we have services right now spread all over the district. So if you need ELL support and services, you're going to be at the Bucher. If you need certain special ed services, you're going to be at the Winthrop, you might be at the Cutler, which really causes breaking up kids in some ways where families got to make a choice, like, okay, I'll put all my kids over there because one of them needs a specialized program, and that's an important piece of the puzzle. Really breaking up small group spaces in between the classrooms. Imagine 2 classrooms of 20 kids in the 2nd grade with a small classroom in between where kids can come out and do an individual project together. and then bring it back into the classroom and present it, because that's what we're doing with younger kids nowadays. We're starting to look at ways to make them learn and understand about different ways of communicating. Think about communicating when you and I were in high school or when you and I were in middle school. We didn't have the internet, the cell phone, all of those things. Now kids really can travel the world in one step. They can go on their computers, they can go onto an iPad, they can use a smartboard, they can also drop it all and just go back to kind of analog and use the books that they have with them, writing, and do all kinds of creative opportunities within the various classrooms. Flexible small learning communities, neighborhoods. These are neighborhoods that work together. So here's an example. We talk about small learning communities. We went to a school in Millis. The school was broken down by grade level communities. So when you went down this big long hallway, you took a left, you went in, and there was the K1 group. And they were in their own little community where they had, I think, 7 classrooms, and they had a library and a tech space built in. So we got the idea of, wow, that's a cool way to think about a library. You and I, we go to the library, it's one place. What if it was 4 different places all throughout the school? What if those kids had opportunities that were grade level based right within their classroom space or within their little neighborhood within the building? And this has nothing to do with the size of the building. It's really how you configure the inside of the building. And then think about ways to bring in STEM resources. Kids in elementary school don't have a lot of opportunity for STEM experience, and that's important to us to be able to say, how do we bring that in to the classrooms? How do we bring that into the spaces? So now your library starts to look different. Your library starts to incorporate not only the media side, but the STEM side, and really gives kids the opportunity to explore and be creative and get outside and pull all kinds of other options that they don't currently have into their learning experiences as they grow through the system. And then the bigger piece with like teacher planning space. When you can take these neighborhoods and park them close enough together so teachers can interact across grade groups and start to plan together and grow together, and even travel with kids through the years, makes a big difference in making that community or neighborhood smaller for our kids all throughout the process of their education, pre-K to 5. Realistically, the educational program, if you haven't looked at it, please look at it. It's really interesting reading. It was quite a feat to write. We had a very short window to write it, and I thank Mike for his guidance. He really drove us and kept the pedal to the metal. But really, we had to dig into everything. We had to look at music. We had to look at art. We had to look at English and math and try to figure out what makes sense, what we have, what we need, what we'd really love to have, what we saw in these other new schools that we'd love to incorporate into our own facilities. And this includes things like safety. In some of these new schools, there are buttons around school. You hit a button and doors close in certain areas and encapsulate areas so that kids are safer and teachers are safer in an instant. Those are all opportunities that we look for in driving this educational plan. We went into the Danvers School. The Danvers School has a very unique stage. You go into the cafeteria, it's the stage. You go into the gym, it's the same stage on the other side. And they can open and close it and share the spaces. So that's how education is changing has changed through the years, and has continued to change as we learn more and more about the human brain and how kids grow and how kids respond to various scenarios within their school buildings. Inclusion, we really want to be as inclusive as possible as we build a new school. And this is programmatic as well as just for general opportunities for kids. Every kid should have the same opportunities as they come through our school district. This gives us an opportunity to do it. Dedicating specific, appropriately sized spaces for specialized programs. Right now, if you're a child who needs PT, you're probably in a room that's too small. Physical therapy, you're probably in a room that's too small. Or you're in the gym while everybody else is in gym class. So those types of things can happen in their own realistic space, giving teachers and kids some privacy and the opportunity to continue to grow and learn. Pushing interventions. These small classrooms I talked about, again, imagine 2 classrooms side by side in a smaller room connected to them. An intervention now can happen where the child does not go very far from the classroom. The interventionist can pull them right into that classroom, can pull kids from multiple classrooms, and continue to work with them and help them to grow and learn through their years. Community access spaces. Our building should be accessible to our communities. This is important to all of us. We talked a lot about community. We talked a lot about bringing the community into our schools. So when we build these schools, you have these areas that are created so that community can come in and they're not ending up in your classroom and places like that, but they can still use your CAF and your gym and some of the conference spaces that we can build, the outdoor areas for celebrations, because it's not just about the school. The community should be able to use our school properties as well and be able to enjoy them as well. And then I talked about safety and security. Safety and security is always on the top of my mind. As a former correctional officer, I think about it far too often. You know, I have a specialized background, and unfortunately, hope I never have to use any of my specialized background personally, but we talk a lot about school safety. And think about, you know, if you have kids in the Winthrop School, your first access point is the cafeteria, which is bizarre to me. You know, you want, what do you have between somebody coming in from the outside and the kids sitting in the cafeteria? Nothing. This gives us the opportunity to look seriously at it, grow it, figure it out, make it safe for access and entry so people can come in and out, but also make it safe for kids and adults while they're in the building during whatever instances of emergency or crisis might happen. And these guys have shown us things already that blew our minds. Really, the Danvers School had some fascinating things built into it, the elementary school in Danvers, and really helped us to think differently and say, wow, we could incorporate some of these things in our schools so that our kids are all safe and our staff is all safe and our community is safe as we're you know, working through the school day. I'm going to pass this along to Jim LaPosta. He's going to take it from here.
I didn't get my steps in today, so
All right.
I'm gonna come over. I need a few steps. I just two slides. There's two slides. One of the things we've been talking about so far is this kind of linear process, right? Of the MSBA has, where you study this, you study that, and you start with lots of options and narrow it down. And while the process is linear, it also is simultaneous. We have to be looking at and thinking about a lot of different things at the same time. And so two things we want to touch on is a little bit more of what the research tells us about what schools should do for kids physically, right? So we've talked a lot about the educational plan, the educational program, but what about their bodies? What about feeling included? What do we know about a healthy building that promotes wellness? Well, we know quite a bit. So this is an example of what a healthy classroom would look like. And any of the options that get selected, this would be a baseline approach. It's in the ed plan, it's best practice, and I think it's what we all want for our kids, is to have healthy environments. So some of the things we'll be looking at are the lighting. Gone are the days of fluorescent lights that hum and buzz and flicker. Lots of lighting options with LED lighting. You can even change the color of the lighting. It's called tunable white lighting for children who might be neurodiverse or adults who may need a different lighting spectrum. Acoustics, huge. Let's just listen for a minute. We don't want to hear that, right? And most every school building has some low-level buzz. It's disruptive to learning, it's disruptive to wellness, so we'll be thinking a lot about the acoustic separation class to class so that kids can focus, but also just the background noise as systems are being developed. Healthy materials, that's been something that's been happening already. I know Tom's been involved in this quite a bit, but it's getting rid of the toxins that are in cleaning materials, but also in building materials, and selecting building materials that are not on what's called a red list, so things that are going to be healthy and not off-gas or create a problem down the road. Natural materials. The idea, while the word's not up here, the idea of biophilia, which is making, you've got beautiful town, beautiful sites. We talked about outdoor learning. The outdoors can come inside, whether it's actual plants. We actually have a green wall in our design studio, or just images of plants. And there's research that shows that makes people feel better and calmer and connected to the world. So thinking about color and texture. Indoor air quality, obviously we all learned a lot about that over the last couple of years, about making sure we're filtering air, we're killing pathogens, we're getting enough fresh air. And I'll say, as architects, for years, that was the first thing on the chopping block when projects had budget issues, was, well, let's just go with a cheaper mechanical system, which you then pay for the next 50 years. So that needs to be on the table. Thermal comfort, kids can't learn if they're not comfortable. If you're too hot, you're too cold, you can't breathe because your nose is too dry, you can't hear because of the acoustics, you're not going to learn. So we're going to make sure that students and teachers are comfortable. One of the things we've seen in new buildings, and my dad was a 9th grade teacher for 30 years. He used to come home from junior high school reeking of smoke because the faculty lounge, was blue. And that was not a healthy environment. And we don't, that's an extreme example, but we've seen that when buildings are either renovated or new buildings are built and you replace these systems, it's better for the people who have to work there, because this is a workplace too, right? It's a community spot. It isn't just a place that you go to for a little bit of time. You need to make your life there. And then natural light and views, connecting the indoors to the outdoors, taking advantage of daylight. It's better for you, but it also reduces energy costs. So there's a long-term savings. And we'll study lots of options to do this, but these are sort of baselines about what a healthy classroom, really a healthy building is like. And so this happens kind of simultaneously. And along with that, and you heard a lot about inclusion in the Ed Plan and what Mike talked about, there's this idea called universal design for learning. I just touched on it a little bit, but it's the idea that everybody is welcome. Now, we've known since 1990 about the Americans with Disabilities Act, and for the longest time, we thought that, having a building that was accessible meant handicap ramps and grab bars. It's so much more than that. It's about kids who are neurodiverse, it's about lighting, it's about ways to collaborate, it's about flexible spaces, it's about making sure that everybody feels like they can find the space they need and not always in a big room, even in a room like this. Not everybody wants to sit at a big table for lunch. They're not comfortable, and they may not want to do it every day. So providing alternative seating layouts so students have choice and voice in where they eat their lunch can go a long way towards the socialization. So these are the things that will be happening concurrent and overlay and with the rest of the design. And as we get into the more detailed design later in the year, you'll start to see these things show up more and more. We'll be talking about these as sort of through lines.
Okay, so I get to do the fun part. Yeah, I don't expect you to be able to read this from the audience. You'll be able to look at this if you go to that QR code on the website to get more information. But we're going to dig into one of these sites and analyze how we sort of took them apart. But the way we begin this process of the feasibility study and design is to look at the available sites that we have. And the district gave us 24 sites in total. That includes the Bucher School, the Cutler School, and the Winthrop School. So a lot of different sites in the towns of Wenham and Hamilton to study and see if there's anything viable out there for us to place this project, to locate this school. So the way this is sliding. The way we begin that is to sort of take the addresses that were handed to us and see what's happening on the ground there, what the sites are like, what the topography is like, if there's wetlands, if there are existing parks, if there are housing complexes. There's a lot of stuff happening in all these sites. Of the 24 that we looked at, we really only found a few that were viable for consideration for this project. So what you see in these columns is the vertical columns are the different sites, and the horizontal columns are the different criteria that we use to sort of assess whether or not they would stand the test for this school at the 4 different enrollments. So those categories begin with the enrollment size. So we actually make a recommendation for enrollment sizes. If you have in this case, a 285 student school, we need at least 7 acres of land. So the bigger the school, the more acreage we need to fit the site amenities, the parking, the bus drop-off, the playgrounds, the playing fields. There's a lot of space outside the school building itself that we need to obviously locate a school project. So the next criteria of importance is wetlands. And pretty much, I would say a large percentage of these sites had a significant amount of wetlands, marshes, actual open water, and that would really take them out for consideration in terms of buildable, developable sites. Another thing that I mentioned already is topography. There's a lot of slope, there's a lot of ledge, and building on a site that's very hilly is just added cost to the project that's not reimbursable from the MSBA. So we're looking for sites that are relatively flat, pretty dry, big enough to locate the whole program. I'm going to just go to the next one. So this is Wenham. And I'll talk about one of the sites in Wenham, the Iron Rail site, which was actually kind of exciting to us. When we looked into it a little further, we found that it wasn't necessarily a viable site. This is the Hamilton sites, and there were 12, or I think 12 on this particular slide, and we're making a recommendation to the the school building committee of the properties at the Cutler School and the Winthrop School to develop this project. So I'm going to look at the Iron Rail site and just sort of talk about some of the things that we're looking at. The Iron Rail is 79 acres. It's really large. There's a significant amount of flat area towards the street on Grapevine Road. There's some existing buildings there. There's some history on the site, certainly. There's a cemetery. There's a lot of topography and wetlands. So when we looked at the actual developable land at the Iron Rail site, it's inside that blue box that you see there. It's about 3.5 acres of sort of flat land. And you can see in that, the inset on the upper right corner of the screen, I just kind of plopped down a footprint of I think it's 125,000 square feet, whatever the size of the 740 student enrollment is on the site. And you can see that blue shade around it is actually the wetland buffer zone. So outside of the school building envelope, there's not a lot of space for parking, bus drop-off, playing fields, playgrounds, outdoor space. So the Iron Rail site, while it has some flat area, isn't really viable for this project. Those flat areas actually have soccer fields. So if we were to build on the soccer fields, we'd have to relocate those soccer fields somewhere else in town at a cost to the project. So for that reason, we kind of took that off the list. Next slide. So that brings us to the recommended sites. So it's the Cutler School site and the Winthrop School site. They both meet the acreage requirement that we have set for the recommendations for the enrollments. The Winthrop site is flat. The Cutler site has flat portions of the site. There are no wetlands on these sites. They actually fit sort of the educational need. They're well located. They're currently schools right now. So we believe that they would be a viable place to explore developing this school. I don't know if you want to talk about the lease extension issue, Eric? Yeah. Sure.
So people may not know, but all of our elementary schools, we lease them from the towns. We don't own any of that land. We own this property. The district owns the high school, middle school property and buildings. But we lease the elementary schools. In order for us to move forward on this project, we have to have, in this case, the town of Hamilton agree to extend the leases that we currently have. All of our leases will end in either Cutler and Winthrop end in 2025, and I think Bucher's in 2020. Oh, it's in 2025 as well. So all three are 2025, and we're in the middle of negotiations now to say, okay, we need some authorization to be able to take control of the land. So we need a lease that's as long as the life of the building. That's the only way the MSBA will jump into granting this project. They'll want something from us to say, yes, the town of Hamilton will lease us one of these properties for at least 50 years. So we're in that process now. We have to still figure out which direction we're going to go in and work those things out, but it's only just begun. It'll be probably 4 or 5 months of negotiation and working those things through, but just wanted people to know that we don't own any of them. We lease all those properties.
All right, thank you. So you already heard we have 15 different options. We decided to develop a sort of alphanumeric to name these options. I think there was an idea floated out there to give them some cute names like the Sparkler or the Pinwheel or something, but with 15 options that would get very confusing. So we're sticking to this very sort of functional approach where the first letter is C for Cutler, W for Winthrop. The second character is a number. That is the project type. So 1 would be a code upgrade base repair. 2 is addition renovation, and 3 is new construction. So this example, C2 is a Cutler addition renovation, and the second number is the enrollment. So this would be a 430 student enrollment. So that's how when you see in the list that you have in your hands, these are the options, and that's how we're sort of determining what they are, just for ease of communicating the different options on the sites. As we get to a selection, if we get down to a few options, we'll probably actually start to break away from this approach. We won't. Apparently we won't.
And MSBA, continuity.
All right, so here we are with the test fit options for the Cutler site. We're calling them test fit options. They're not really design options, they're fit studies. We're taking the education plan and we're developing a space template that we can use to sort of test out how things will fit on the site. to make sure it actually fits, right? And it's the basics that we would need. The building program, the sort of space outside of the net square footage, like hallways, we just add that into the space model, and then put it on the site and test out circulation, bus loops, parent loops, parking, et cetera, where the playing fields will go to see if it actually works. So this is broken down for the Cutler School. You start with the orange column is the base code, base upgrade and code upgrade and base repair, sorry, for the 285 student option. That's a K5 grade configuration, and it's about 45,000 square feet. That's the size of the existing building. We're not doing an addition in this. It's within the existing walls of the Cutler School. I'm not going to go through each one, all the details of each. We can certainly talk about this in Q&A. But the pink would be the addition renovation options, and that's taking a portion of the existing building, renovating it, and adding on to it. So for these, a really important consideration when we're developing these approaches to constructing a new or renovated school is how we do it, how we keep students on site, how we don't displace them during the school year. We want to try to keep students in their building, phase it so that we can sort of move them into new construction as we're moving through the process. So we don't have to pay for portables that are not reimbursable. We don't have to move them off-site to another location to get their education. So that's how we're sort of considering all these approaches, whether it's a renovation addition or a new school. It's how to keep them in school and learning on the site. So the new construction is a much more straightforward approach on the Cutler site. We have a lot of area on the Cutler site where we can build while the existing school is occupied, move them into the new school, then take down the original building and build the site amenities, the playing fields, and all the other stuff that would happen there. So then for the Winthrop site, we don't have a code upgrade. That doesn't fit with the ed plan. And we don't have the 285 student enrollment because that also doesn't work on this site. It doesn't fit the ed plan. So that starts with the 430 student addition renovation up to the 740. And on this option, it's a little more difficult in terms of the phasing because we have to keep students in the existing facility. There's not enough site there to build a building adjacent to it and then take down the original building and move them into the new building for the new construction. So it really represents a longer, more complicated phasing and construction schedule. So we have sort of a list of pros, cons for all the options. And I can sort of just hit sort of a high level on these. Obviously, the C10, keeping the original building and renovating that, we're keeping the existing building. We don't have to change anything. We're not building anything new. It's a renovation. So it retains the entire existing facility. It doesn't affect the site infrastructure. We can keep pretty much everything that's there. And there's no additional load on the septic system. We know that if we put more students on the site, we have to change that septic system. We have to add to it. Cons, it doesn't meet the educational program down the road. And the building's not capable of absorbing any additional enrollment in the future. We also have a hilly site. It's difficult for students who have disabilities to get into the school from the drive aisles. It's steep, so that's a challenge that would be very hard to sort of mitigate with this renovation option. Also, one of the things, a lot of the stuff that Eric was talking about, learning communities, having different ways of teaching and learning, it'd be very difficult to accommodate that in this building as it exists now without an addition. There's no opportunity to enlarge the gymnasium. It's non-regulation, it's too small. We couldn't make it bigger within the footprint. And then, like the administrative offices, we're sort of stuck with the existing envelope. So the renovation addition options, we have more opportunity. What we want to do here is keep the original classroom wing, which is we see as the best part of the building, take down the modulars, take down the cafeteria, take down the gymnasium, and build new around that. So keep the existing classrooms, renovate those, try to create breakout spaces within that to create learning communities like we're posing for next generation learning, and then build that addition around it. So with this, there's pros and cons. We can go through these really quickly. It preserves the best part of the original school, the existing classroom wing. It's also phased in a way we can keep students on site. It's a new image from the street. You get a new school from Asbury Street. Cons, when you get up to the larger enrollments, it's because of the way it lays out, we have to go to a 3-story option for the larger enrollments, which is a challenge. We don't really want to build a 3-story elementary school, but we'd be sort of pinned to that in the larger enrollments on this renovation addition option. Also, more phases requires more time equals more money. I'll go on to the next. So new construction options, this is building a new building on the site of the playing fields, essentially, and in one phase, taking down the old building and then building the fields on that portion of the site to the east. This allows us the most flexibility for design, for creating a modern building with learning communities that are based on the way we think about education into the future. It has a more compact footprint. We see this creating a lot of opportunities for outdoor learning within enclosed protected courtyards, and easily separating community functions from those classroom functions. With the renovation addition, it's a little more challenging to separate the community functions from the classroom functions. With this, we have a much more shortened construction schedule, so it's really less expensive over time per square foot. Some of the cons, when we're building the fields on that hilly portion of the site, there's more excavation, rock removal, which can incur costs. And the building where it's located is a little closer to the property lines. We have pastures to the north and a neighborhood to the west. We'd be sort of close to those property lines, within the setbacks though. And as Eric talked about, we don't control the site. The lease agreement ends in 2025. So with the Winthrop School, a lot of the same pros and cons, and you can certainly look at this when you go to the website. So I know we're kind of running over time. We want to get to Q&A as quickly as possible. So should I just move on then, Eric? Yeah, okay. That's good.
All right. For the sake of time, and I know there's questions, I don't want to skip over this slide because it is a extremely critical slide to show you, but this is our first comparative estimate for the preliminary design program phase. Again, we don't have detailed designs. These are essentially square foot estimates, and they are to just compare each of the options to show how they, what the cost looks like compared to each other. So again, this is not a budget, it's not a super in-depth estimate, but it is a part of the submission that we need to send to the MSBA at the end of January. We will go through 2 more rounds of estimating before the town vote in 2025. During the PSR, we'll go through a bit more of a detailed estimate, and then during schematic design is when we really kind of get into that much deeper estimate, and that's when we create that MSBA 3011 form that I mentioned, which really dictates what the reimbursement from the MSBA will be. So these estimates are also on the handouts that you have at the bottom, so you do have that information as well. I'm not going to read through them, but wanted to make sure that everybody knew that this is not necessarily a very detailed estimate. It's a comparative cost analysis to compare each of the options to each other. So the last slide was Cutler, and this is the Winthrop site. Really, at the end of the day, you can see the differences. Cutler estimates came back a little bit lower than what the Winthrop site is showing, and that is largely in part to what Peter was just talking about with the phasing of the new construction options. It's just a bit more of a difficult phasing scenario on the Winthrop site, so that increases time, increases phasing, and it just costs more money the longer projects are. So that's largely the biggest reason for some of the more expensive values on the Winthrop site compared to Cutler. I know a lot of questions that probably everybody has is how much is the MSBA contributing to this project? We do not know that yet. We will start to do analysis of that in the next phase, in the PSR phase, as we kind of get into a bit more detailed estimates. We'll start to pull together some preliminary estimates on what we think the MSBA reimbursement will be. That will continue to be refined up until we have the town vote, at which point, again, that 3011 form will have exactly what the maximum facilities grant will be from the MSBA. So before this goes to vote, everybody will know exactly what that value is, and we will start to produce some of those values in the next phase. Do you want to touch on just the reimbursement? One item that has changed recently in this past year was an increase to the MSBA's reimbursement, which doesn't happen often. So.
Okay, I noticed people looking at their phones. We're going a little long, so I'm going to try not to go too fast, but I do want to kind of summarize. You heard an awful lot that leads up to good news on this chart. One, you heard all about these exciting things about we're investigating different enrollments, a base reno, an ad reno, a new, but then you heard some descriptive why it won't work. And you might be thinking, I saw some heads shrugging, why'd you waste your time doing that then? Well, as Eric said, if you want to join the MSBA's program, you have to follow their milestones, follow the modules, meet their milestones in order to receive their grant. And the basic elements that we have to do for the MSBA is we have to investigate a code, an ad reno, and a new, and put a cost to that. We're not doing it because, we know some of them don't seem to make a lot of sense. I saw a lot of heads nodding. We agree with you, but it's part of the prescriptive nature of the MSBA. And this is a great slide because the MSBA says if you meet our milestones, you meet our modules, we're going to reward you with a grant. They're not a reimbursement agency. They don't do dollar for dollar. They can't, because then they wouldn't be able to spread the wealth around the Commonwealth and build schools in many communities. They have to be very selective in who they choose, and they have eligible cost caps, and they have reimbursement rates. So the town will be assigned a base reimbursement rate that's around, right now, a base about 47%. There are some incentive points available to us about lead design and other elements that will increase that by several points, which is hundreds of thousands of dollars, so we're reaching for that, and that is a goal of ours, is to incorporate things like that to get you more reimbursement. Now, this is the great story, and timing is everything. When Eric and his team started this process, the MSBA hadn't increased their per dollar construction cost in years. I think the last time was before COVID. And anyone out there that does the shopping, you can relate what's going on in the world right now to what's going on in the construction world. Just before COVID and through COVID, the cost of construction went like this. The cost of the MSBA per dollar square foot reimbursement stayed flat. There was a larger gap over the last 3 years. It got larger and larger on what a school actually costs to build per square foot and how much they could afford to reimburse you. Well, as we're coming along in the process, the state legislators this year, in their infinite wisdom, did a great job, decided to lift the cap. The MSBA was capped at how much they could borrow in order to give out to cities and towns. Legislator lifted a cap, raised it. Then the MSBA, at a MSBA Board of Directors meeting, saw fit, for the first time in almost 3 years, to raise how much we're going to get per square foot. It went from $432 a square foot to $605 a square foot. So there has never been a more opportune time in the MSBA world and in the construction world than there is now. We're going to have the advantage of that economic line and the cost of construction, and the MSBA line hasn't been that close since maybe 5 years after their program started. We're getting closer. It's not going to be what the construction dollars cost. It's more than $605 a square foot, and there are eligible and ineligible costs, but it's never been better. So that's some great news that you can come home with tonight. And Alicia's going to go. Okay.
I am going to be very brief because I can tell, the clicker, thank you, that you people have been patient and attentive, but it's time to wrap it up for Q&A. So just summarizing, we're ending up the preliminary design program phase, as we've spoken about, and we're at the time where the school building committee is evaluating the design options. As we've heard, we have 15 options, and they're in compliance with the very prescriptive MSBA process so that we get our grant. We have the code upgrade and base repair, and the peach as a reminder. The pink is the ad reno, and then we have the blue for the new construction. And all of those options are going to be evaluated against, and this matrix allows us to do a comparative and objective evaluation that will allow the building committee to rank each of these from either not preferable to highly favorable. So it's a good, thorough evaluation process to evaluate the options. And the matrix that we showed had 5 overarching categories of criteria that we're looking at. This information was derived, these 5 categories was derived from the educational visioning process that Mike spoke about, that then resulted in the educational program that Superintendent Tracy spoke of, that is, as we've spoken about, the baseline and foundation for the entire project from start to finish. So to take an example, this educational piece here was the thing that we looked at, and for the reasons that we said. And so this kind of a process will be used throughout the project, including in the next phase, which is the preferred schematic report, as we've heard, where we'll hone the design options and the process. So that's really it. Thank you. Eric is going to wrap it.
Thank you, Alicia. So this really outlines our next steps, and as you can see, we've got a ways to go. We really have a number of opportunities ahead of us. We have a lot of work still to go. The committee's got a lot of work to do. The 2 teams here are working daily. I mean, we meet with them weekly, and sometimes more than weekly, to make sure that, the things are moving in the direction we'd like them to move in, and they can keep us up to date with all of the issues along the way. The PDP submission will happen on January 25th. That's our kind of our next milestone, and that really just says to the MSBA, here are all the things we've done from when we started in August, when these teams came on board, to now. And then we'll expand on that. They will comment on that. They'll actually ask questions and give us comments to say, can you expand on this? Can you tell us more about this? So we're looking forward to that. We'll do more community forums as we grow into this, especially as we start to look at the way schools are designed. I mean, one of the things that excites me about school design is all the different things that we can do for kids to really make their day exciting and useful and also restful, and to build right into our schools, our cafeterias, our classrooms, things like that. And then we'll move through this process all the way up until the town vote. We'll do a request for funds at the town meeting in April of 2025. And as you know, that will go to the ballot on the following Thursday, if that remains the same as it always is. But that's really where we're heading in the next short while. It seems like a long ways away, but I've been involved in this. This is my 3rd year as superintendent. I feel like I've been involved in it all 3 years, and it's like, wow, this stuff's flying right along and getting more and more exciting by the day. We have this community forum. We have another one next week. It's the same thing as we're doing today, but if you want to come back and hear it again, please do. We really want to give people the opportunity to learn about this process and understand this process. There is a lot of money on the line, and I think it's important for people to understand that there's also a lot of money that we can get from the state and the grant program. It doesn't matter what we build. We build a small school, a middle-sized school, a large school. It doesn't matter. There's still 47-ish% reimbursement available. And it's not dollar for dollar, as Kevin said. It's really an opportunity for us to gain some funding back as a grant from the state. There's nothing we have to give them back. They basically say, we'll cover X percentage of your program. We can expand those numbers too by adding in, looking at LEED certification, so what type of sustainability things are happening, and we can get extra points along the way. And this team knows that we're very interested in doing that. To try and continue to reduce the overall cost of the project. So next Wednesday, 9 to 10:30 in the high school auditorium, and we're not there tonight because the kids are getting ready for a play. The middle school play is coming up. The Drowsy Chaperone starts tomorrow. Yeah, tomorrow night, Friday night, Saturday. If you want to have a good time, go to the play. But next week we'll use the auditorium and spread it out a little bit. But the website is also a great place. We've been pouring, Jen Caulfield, who does our community outreach, really has spent a lot of time with everybody here. Far too much time probably, just trying to get documents out there and make sure we have everything in the right order so that people can see the process. We want to be transparent. If you have a question, anytime, go to the website. There's an FAQ box, type it in there. This entire team reviews the question and we'll answer it and we'll post it right on the FAQ document that's on the website. We've gotten some great questions and all that just in the last few days, and we'll continue to put those out there. Read the FAQs first, then ask your question, because your question may have already been answered. But speaking of questions, we're going to move into a Q&A here with members of the team. Michelle's very excited over there, so we'll let her kick it off.
So, two things. One, I heard about the wanting to bring the community in. I know that one of the programs was to have people from the community access the buildings. I know some schools have put their councils on agings in schools. Hamilton has a very old building that's basically on the Winthrop site, so if they were going to redevelop it, it'd probably be a good idea to have that whole site free, so I was curious if that has been thought in the plan. We also have an administrative building that is close to 100 years old. It has a poor heating, poor air conditioning, poor plumbing, is not accessible to anyone who doesn't walk on two legs steadily. So what are we doing about possibly incorporating those things into our plan for the new school building?
I'm going to take that one. The reality is we haven't gotten to that point yet. Those expenses become unreimbursable. So if the community wants to pay for it, sure, we build it into the project. So I'll give you an example. I was part of the building committee for the Wilmington High School project, and the community really wanted a second-story track inside the gym. They paid full cost for it, and they were willing to do it. They wanted it. And they also put in an orchestra pit in the auditorium because their theater program and their music program was huge, but they had to pay for the whole thing. So that's where that reimbursement and non-reimbursement comes in. I'll give you another example for us. We're struggling with the preschool program. Preschool can't be included in this elementary project as a reimbursable. So you could say, yeah, we want to have 3 preschool classrooms, but we end up paying for them. That's the important piece to keep in mind. Whatever we decide that's not within the bounds of MSBA, we have to decide if we want to pay for that, and that's that value cost averaging, if you will, and trying to figure out value adds and value removes along the way. And that will come in the next probably, well, what do we have, almost a year between now and April. What's that? No, yeah, there's a COA in Hamilton and a COA in Wenham, but the building she's talking about is where my office is, that has the year-round open windows. It's awfully breezy. But that's a good question. That's part of the conversation that will occur along the way. Like, you may come up to this building, and I'll use Newton as an example, $330 million building. Not very much of it got reimbursed because they were like, we need these special tiles. And so there are real conversations that we have to have about what makes sense for us as we build this and what kind of works as we grow through the project. Good question. Another one? And she's off.
I have 2, maybe they're connected. Hi, everybody. So one is, help me better understand how the fine people here are going to make the decision about what goes to MSPCA for so there's a lot of scenarios here, right? Especially programmatically and educationally, and it's clear to me that those are not up for community decision-making for all sorts of reasons. So help me better understand those criteria and sort of what those, how that's gonna happen. And then secondly, and it's more of this is in the weeds and phase later, is let's pretend we go into a scenario where we've made a decision on Cutler or Winthrop for 3 through 5. What happens to Bucher for a Bucher family, right? So because Bucher then theoretically wouldn't be touched. So all these beautiful things about neighborhoods and whatever. So just talk to me about that.
So therein lies that equity piece, but let me go back. Let me do the first question first. you mind if I answer this one? I think I got it. You can jump in if I'm wrong. Yeah, nobody sitting in front of you is involved in the process of deciding. Nobody. Well, Tom and I are on the committee. We are actually members of the committee. There's a few people here who are on the committee, but the school building committee makes the decision, and that's the MSBA requires that, which is why we're collecting so much data, which is why we're doing these community outreaches, which we will get to a point where we're going to say to the community, what are your thoughts about these options that we have? We're really trying to gather as much information. If you go back to the sheet that Alicia showed here, this took individuals hours and hours to do, to actually sit and evaluate what are the adjacencies, how do they work with this building or that building or that building. And then that brings us 19 people, did this, and that's one piece of the puzzle. Then you start talking about what's the research say about big schools, small schools? What does the research say about play and outdoor spaces? And then what are we hearing from the community? What makes sense for the communities in general? So from the government side, what are their kind of plans and aspirations growing through this process? And then the second question you had was really an equity thing, and depending on the option you choose, there are really a whole number of movements that can be made. You can start with, okay, we're gonna build that first option, 285 kids on the Cutler site, Cutler School. Really nobody moves but the Cutler kids. They move from the old building to the new building and they knock it down and everybody else remains in place. If you build, and I'll just go to the other end of the spectrum for a good example. If you build a bigger school with 1 to 5, then what do you do with your preschool and K kids? And that's where the Bucher would come into play. So part of those conversations are what's happening on the ground, if you will, through the educational program and through the conversations within the school district about what makes sense at the school building committee level. So school building committee really has that decision and drives a lot of that. And there'll be, you know, even if we didn't build a building, I have to be honest, we need to reconfigure our grades because I have Winthrop building that's blowing out at the seams. Bucher that's blowing out at the seams, and Cutler that's kind of, you know, we're just using what we can over there without worrying about any issues. Did I answer your question? Okay. You have one in the back?
Hi, I have questions about the topography. It seems like Cutler School is being sort of presented as the place to be, and a green building. So topography has to do with where I live. I'm Jeannie Miranda. I live at 21 Garfield, and when I look out my kitchen window, it'll be about 30 feet, and that's the building. So it would drastically change my property if it's built where I just saw there. So, and looking out my kitchen window, I saw that field this morning, and it was a lake. So the topography, as you know about Cutler, it's on a hill, and the water goes down. We all know that. And so I think that a lot of thinking has to be going into why, of course, the builders built it up there. We know why. And I think it should stay there. So that's one thing. The other part is the green building. So as the chair of the Hamilton Environmental Impact Committee, this is a #1 priority for us, that all buildings be green. Hamilton voted to go net zero carbon by 2040, which is an admirable thing, and we're working on it at this very moment to do this. The whole town is, you know, the whole town is, and those are, anyway, specific things, but how will this be green? Also, the destruction of a building means carting all kinds of materials away at a very expensive cost. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to hand this one off. Somebody over here is going to have to answer this one.
The easy one is the demolition in the carton. And to be LEED certified, to be green, the majority of that building will be recycled. That's part of the industry now. Things get segregated into piles by material, and we'll realize, the community will realize the benefit if they can recycle and get money for the steel part. Send their asphalt, brick, and concrete to another part. That makes the demolition cost less. We'll also track that for our LEED points through the contractor. Whoever the successful contractor is will be required to tell us where it's going, how much tonnage, and we'll report that. On the drainage part and up on a hill, I have an engineering background, and I love saying, it's my favorite quote, is better living through engineering. We have to investigate all things site, and most importantly, septic, drainage, and utilities. You're covered as a neighbor by regulations, laws, and codes. We're not allowed to increase runoff onto other people's property. We have to do a better job now when if we build a new school there, in collecting drainage and treating it on site before it goes off site. There's all new rules and regulations. There's things called stormwater protection plans, NIPSES permits, all these criteria that we have to meet before we can even get an approved construction project. So that is going to be an intimate part of the design, the utilities, drainage, and site preparation. So, and the other thing was lost.
Topography.
Topography, let's talk about topography. Because topography has a lot to do with schools, levels, and
Right. So we want to be sensitive to all the neighbors that we impact. And, I think these test fit studies maybe aren't as, subtle as they could be. I think we will look at screening, we look at scale of buildings, scale relationships to neighbors across the street. And that's something that will certainly be more developed as we get further along in design, as we get to a preferred schematic approach. But we understand that, and it's part of what we think about as designers. So it's really critical to us to play well in the sandbox with the neighbors and do the most sort of responsible and appropriate kind of design in the community. I mean, it's hard to find a virgin site with no neighbors anymore in this world. So we're sort of we're trying to do the best thing we can with what we've been given. Geothermal is an option that we'll be exploring, yeah.
I mean, relative to sustainability is very important to JCJ, and we have an out-of-house expert, Soden Sustainability, that will be leading the charge and looking at sustainability and how we'll approach things in PSR, Preferred Schematic Report, excuse me. And then we also have an in-house expert that was on the team slide. Eric Habstern is our Director of Sustainability, so it's super important to us. We'll be looking at all of that, including geothermal, solar, federal tax incentives and rebates. We'll really be looking at life cycle and initial costs. So that's something that will be looked at once we get to the next phase.
Hi, thank you. My name is Agnes Forbrot. I know the design team. We actually work on a project in Manchester together and some others. I have 3 kids in the school system, 2 high school, 1 elementary, and nice to meet you. I will be talking to you. So I have 3 questions and a comment, and I'll try to be quick. The first one, I'm really interested into how we came up with those enrollment options. And second would be how the sustainability goals will be set and how the community, people like me, can have an impact. I'm living in an almost net zero energy home, LEED certified gold, and I'm very interested to make the school sustainable and healthy in particular. The third question will be, can we estimate the tax impact on taxpayers just to know what to plan with kids going to college, etc. And a small comment, I read your blog every week. It would be great to include this project. I only learned about a month ago about it, and I would love to be involved. I emailed you a couple times. I guess it's too late for the building committee, but I would love to share my expertise in LEED certification and sustainability and help with the project. So that's pretty much it. Thank you.
It's an elementary school, a high school, a middle school, it's a one school, or it might be consolidation. What they'll typically do is say, okay, we get the Cutler school, and we do a little dance back and forth, and the population is going to get greater, and they give you 50 extra kids that they allow in the school. Through your negotiation early on, before we got here, you got multiple enrollment options, again, which is out of the norm. That's not typically what the MCA does. So whatever you did to convince them, I don't know, but you did a good job.
Is it on? All right. As with all things with MSBA, they have a very prescriptive process, how they arrive at student enrollments with the districts that they invite into eligibility. So again, long before PMA or JCJ got involved, this district was in negotiations with MSBA relative to the demographics. They look at 10-year studies. They don't arrive by it by accident. They also have conversations with the district as to how they operate and what their long-term solutions might be. So they try to look at every aspect of delivering education, both in the short and long term, and how that matches up with educational trends.
And essentially, they handed us the semi-interested in the Winthrop School, and then the Bucher School was kind of like, no, we don't want to go in that direction. So they ended up focusing on 2 schools, whereas in other communities you might have a focus only on 1 school. They did finally decide to say, we'll let you build 1 school, we'll focus on the Cutler School, but you could use different enrollment options, and here they are. We will fund your grant through the program, looking at these options with all the other expansions, so that those 4 options expand out to 15 more when you start to look at sites and locations and designs and things like that. As far as the tax burden, we couldn't tell you right now because we don't know what the reimbursement rate would be. I wouldn't want to say, okay, it's going to be a $60 million bond for 30 years when it's not. So we're not in that position yet to put a tax rate out, but we are working with FinCom, select boards. I just left a meeting of the 5 chairs before I came here, and we were talking about some of those things too, like how to make sure that people really understand this is the tax burden of not only this project, but other projects that towns have. Each of the towns has their own capital projects in line as well. So what does that burden look like over time? So that will be coming. It's just we'd be giving false information out if we gave a number. To say this is exactly your tax burden. So we don't know yet, and I wouldn't want to tell you something that's false. And then the sustainability piece. Okay.
Agnes, we'd love to have your participation because, as we've explained, this is a process where we start with broad concepts that we narrow down to specifics. So the preliminary design program is about right-sizing the school. What is the area that's going to be required to align with your educational program? Full disclosure, that's often why code upgrades programs are not supported by MSBA. They don't support the educational program. Plain and simple, right? They're not large enough. For some other reason, but primarily comes down, doesn't support the educational program. So we have the right size of the school for the different grade configuration that's aligned with your educational program. We also have to pick a site. So right now we have 2 sites in play. We have 4 different grade configurations. We have a code upgrade, we have additional renovation, we have the study as well as construction. We're trying to get that down to a more finite set, but we're going to advance 15 in the first schematic report. Now we're starting to drill into the detail. So that's where we're going to start having sustainability conversations with the committee, oftentimes with the subcommittee. Community participation is invited and encouraged so that we make sure, signing a pledge to meet carbon neutrality by 2040. That's important, especially if the project will be built in Hamilton. So we want to make sure that we overlay those types of commitments and integrate that into the design. We're starting to get that into that conversation. We'll introduce that as a preferred schematic report, and once we get into schematic design, before we get to the final costs, that will be presented to the taxpayers to decide whether to support the project. So stay tuned, there will be opportunities.
One last part of that answer would be that the building committee meetings are public. They're posted, and you can join if they're on Zoom. You can join in, listen in. And if it's something you hear spurs a question, go on our portal and ask a question.
Hi. I have 2 teenagers in the school system. One is in middle school, and the other one is in high school. My question is your team also handling the indoor and outdoor playing fields? Secondly, talking about sustainability, are you guys planning to install any artificial turfs in the elementary school? Because I'm one of those residents who's completely baffled about the high school project. I can't understand how artificial turf is green and sustainable. A conversation we must have. I'm in the ocean sciences, and I go to see marine organisms mean a lot to me, and there are reports that turf fibers end up in the ocean, and they get into the intestines of lots of organisms, and so that's something I'm especially concerned about. So if you can answer those questions, I greatly appreciate it. Last thing, my younger daughter, who's now in middle school, went to Cutler. It's one of her favorite places. Is the Cutler School. It's very charming. It has an amazing setting. It's very rustic. But most importantly, she had some really fantastic teachers in Cutler. When the school ended, like the last day of school, I have her clothes from 4th grade. She doesn't want to wash them. It's her memory of 4th grade. She has clothes that she's kept from the last day of school in 5th grade. She will never let me wash it. That's how special color is to her. So whatever you do, I hope you'll make it environmentally friendly. So far, I'm really liking what I hear. Another thing is, she did have one request to please put enough swings in the playground, because in the time that she was in school, she said there were not enough swings, and the kids are always competing for the swings. So that was her request, to please have enough swings.
Thank you.
So the answer for our PMA is no, we're not involved in the school, and the other projects. We're involved in the school project. 58 years old, I went to Lyndhurst Elementary School in my neighborhood. My first grade teacher was Miss Duguay. I'll never forget her. I'll never forget that school. So that was, you hit me there. That was good. And we take that to account. It was part of the interview. I believe we asked questions about what are you going to do to build a school that complements the neighborhood, that complements the town. And that was a challenge we put towards them. So I hope they take your question. I know they will. Take the question you just asked, and it's going to be reflected, I think, in whatever the outcome of the new design might be. And then for your environmental questions, we're taking it a step further. It's not just the turf outside. I think someone touched on it. Every element that goes into that school is going to be good for the environment, from the floor tiles to the painting to off-gassing to LEED or recycled materials. Everything gets looked at and everything will be considered. What's best for indoor air quality, we talked about. Indoor environment, all on the table, all pertinent questions, very good. Come to the building. We're not doing a turf field. No turf field.
Thank you.
Stop that.
Hi, thanks. I'm Ann Arnett, live in Hamilton, and 2 kids at Winthrop School. These designs are huge. Like, these are really big buildings. Even just renovating Cutler would almost double the square footage of the current school. And I was curious how you landed there, and I wonder whether there's any consideration of doing something a little bit more conservative for the sake of reducing the costs. And I wonder whether that would also potentially open up opportunity to really more seriously consider maintaining the 3 community schools. If we can save some money on the MSBA project and ask the taxpayers to pay for, out of pocket for a renovation of Winthrop or something like that. I think there might be some more options here that aren't on the table when we think about MSBA being the only way to go.
Thank you.
So size-wise, Doug, you can jump in. I can tell you size-wise, if we talk about the prescriptive nature of the MSBA, and if you want their grant, you want their reimbursement, you have to go by their regulations. And they have things like minimum size classroom, maximum size classroom, minimum size media center, maximum size media center. The DESI spaces, your pull-out spaces, they're all prescribed. So right down to the exact square footage, we get a range. So we have to meet at least the minimum. And I believe that's what we've done here, is we haven't gone to the max on any of our test fits. We're doing what's reasonable at this point of the design and what we know. So if you want to just jump in.
Again, MSBA reviews everything. They will review the educational program. Because that is, as we keep repeating, that is the baseline that everything is measured against. That is the district's plan to deliver education in the short term and 50 years in the future. So MSBA wants to make sure that if they're going to invest the taxpayers' dollars in the Hamilton London School project is going to achieve that goal. They're looking out to all of the taxpayers in the Commonwealth, but specifically they want to meet the needs of the Hamilton London School District. So special education, as Kevin indicated, DESI spaces, special education spaces are developed in this very prescriptive space template that dictates what this, or develops the size of the building, square footage. So it's a space per space analysis of the spaces that are outlined in the educational plan to get at that right size school. And we have to do one of these space templates for each of the grade configurations to really test and evaluate, as we get into the details, the impacts to the taxpayers ultimately. So a lot of this is driven by the educational needs married with the prescriptive nature of the MSP process to make the project eligible for state reimbursement.
And as your owner's project manager, we're challenged throughout the process to maintain budget and not exceed it. We're checked at every phase by the MSBA, we got checked ourselves. We have 2 independent cost estimators, one on the design team, one on the owner's OPM team. They're the best at estimating. We send them off in their corners, they give us the probable cost. If we're over budget, we go back to the building committee, we go back to the administration, and we figure out why, and we bring it back on budget. We don't want to come back to you and say, we need an extra, we're going to right size, equip it right, the right HVAC system for the budget that fits Hamilton well.
I'm going to just add a little answer to your question. You know, if in reality we say, okay, we're going to build, I'll just use the Cutler site as an example, the smallest option for the Cutler School as an option. That leaves us with Bucher and Winthrop still. Those renovation costs will be in the multi-millions of dollars too. So it's really a problem for the community to say, okay, we're going to bond, I'll just use 50 million. We're going to bond $50 million. That'll raise our taxes X number a year. And then on top of that, we may have to bond another 50 or $60 million because we don't have state reimbursement. So it's really, you know, up to the community and the taxpayers to decide when they vote, say this is what we want or don't want. And I think that's the hard part. Like when you're looking into options here, the MSBA doesn't give us any option outside of what they're saying. They're saying we'll fund the project if these criteria are met. Correct. Correct. Correct, by the school building committee. The final numbers, as we get, I can't remember the exact date, but when we get through that whole schematic design process, approaching town meeting, that 2025 town meeting, we'll know ahead of that.
Yeah, we don't go out to the vote without the solid budget.
Hi everyone, this is Francesca Connors, and I met a lot of you before. So I have 2 kids at Winthrop, one that went to Winthrop, one that has to go to Winthrop, hopefully. If you guys don't decide to tear down this Stubbins building, which I am like shocked that it's even a possibility considered here. Does anybody know that that Winthrop School was built by Hugh Stubbins? Maybe one of the architects here can talk a little bit about that, because it's kind of like taking a Picasso and throwing it into like a fireplace. Well, I mean, head of architecture at Harvard that built the largest building in Japan, a number of buildings in Manhattan. You know, I mean, we should be proud of things like that in Hamilton, I would think, as opposed to kind of not even talking about it. But in any case, so besides that, I'm really, really worried about the ideas of consolidating, since I have one more son that has to go to an elementary school, hopefully in Hamilton, depending on how things go, obviously here. Looking, yeah, I have a lot of questions in my mind right now, just so many. But I think the most important is a little bit following up on what the person said before me. And I understand that, you know, we have a lot of uncertainty and a lot of things we can't tell for sure how much this is going to cost. I get it. It's hard to go into the details. We're just doing a ballpark estimate. We're just doing like what we call in science, like a smell test.
Well, I want to tell you that.
Wait, let me finish.
Just
Can I finish?
finish, but it's not ballpark.
I haven't even.
It's not a ballpark. I don't want that to get lost though. The costs that we showed and presented are based on MSBA historical cost data and our 2 cost estimators they're able to put that level of, that cost on it at the level of detail that we have. It's not a dart throw at the wall. It's with thought.
Yeah, there, I mean, and I can see that.
Okay, good.
But when I kind of reviewed it, and I didn't have much time because it was released like a couple weeks ago or something, right before Christmas, but I'm particularly interested in options C21 and C31. Personally, for me, are the one that makes more sense for our community. Obviously, you know, everybody has their own idea, and this is mine. And looking at that in detail, I'm a little bit shocked to see that you're proposing an 80, like you're doubling the square footage, and you're saying this is all prescribed, but I don't know about that. I mean, look at what you guys did in Manchester. In Manchester, you're housing more than 400 K through 5, including a preschool, right? You guys did that, so you probably can talk a little bit about that. So it's 400 students, and instead of like 84,000 square feet, that was about 77. So you, in Manchester, you were able to house about 30% more students in a building that's 10% smaller. So can you please explain this a little bit? Because the MSBA funded that, and that costed half of what you are suggesting here in the cost estimate. So sorry, I'm going a little bit in the weeds.
No,
I'm really
it's
curious
good. I get your
about
question, but
what
I'm
you're
gonna
thinking.
I'm gonna let Doug answer. I wasn't involved in the Manchester project. I don't know the apples to apples comparison. I'm gonna have to let Doug answer.
Again, it goes back to the educational program. No two are exactly alike. So looking at 77,000 versus 8,000, we'd have to look at what are the number of classrooms, what are the number of special education spaces. We'd have to compare the educational programs. They're not apples to apples comparisons.
Like, here's a perfect example. Because we went and toured that building. The number of special education programs alone in this community is beyond double and triple what Manchester Essex has. So those classrooms have to be dedicated, full-size classrooms, even if you have 4 or 5 special students in a particular special education program. Let's say it's an autism program. You still provide a full-size classroom. That classroom has an associated bathroom with it that's accessible for students, and typically some type of like calming space or something like that. So special education alone is completely different than Manchester Essex. One of the other components of this educational program is this idea of having space for students to really collaborate and spill out into these 150 square foot or 200 square foot spaces that are visible classrooms. Because as a teacher, I would be, doing literature circle book clubs or something, and the other teacher that was in the room with me might want to pull 4 kids, or I might want to pull 4 kids and go and work in that space and talk to them about the book or whatever, and then, they go in and out back into the full classroom. Manchester Essex also doesn't have things like that either. So there's also extended learning space, areas where all of the classrooms can come out and collaborate together. We're taking part of this educational program, when you read it, we talked about the fact that, just like us, we don't all want to go eat in the same place. So portions of what's allowable for the cafeteria are kind of carved out to create more acoustically separate areas that are allowing kids to kind of like just hang out and have a quieter opportunity to take a breath throughout the day as they're eating their lunch. Manchester Essex doesn't have anything like that. So there are many things. Here's one thing I'll say. I've been in education for over 20 years, right? And then doing this work for over 6 years. Change is difficult, change is hard. And yes, there's many things, there's costs, there's all these things that go along with it. But when you're trying to look at and compare other schools in square footages and numbers like that, I think what you have to really take the time to do is look at the actual educational program. Because there's no atriums, there's no fancy lobby space. I'll tell you, I work with a lot of architecture firms. This is one architecture firm that doesn't worry about fancy things like that and only is really looking at what the educational program says. So Manchester, if you look, you can ask, it's probably a lot. If you look at the educational program of that, and you look at the Hamilton School, again, I can't express this enough. No matter what enrollment option, that educational program holds true. The ideal opportunity to give the special education students the programs they need, to have those small group groups, even in just a Cutler option or just a Winthrop option,
those things the district wants to put in place. So just understand it from that perspective.
Well, I just wanted to comment real quickly that I really think I was making an apple-to-apple comparison. And I think that this school that they built and the J&J team really can say that it's a great school. So I really can't understand why this would cost double for more square foot for less students. And you can put it however you want it, but, and I was at the educational visioning sessions and all that thing, so I don't know, it just seems like a lot of words to me. Yeah, so I can leave it to the next.
To your first comment, I think, I speak for myself, I think the design team as well, it's an honor to renovate the Stebbins building and bring that into this. It's a challenging building. It's very cool. If you look inside there, it wasn't built for the sort of systems and infrastructure we have now. So it'd be a great challenge to work with that building if the community should decide that's the route to go. You know, but that's not really, that decision is up to us. Right. We don't like tearing down, monuments to our, if that happens.
I have two kids. One will be in kindergarten next year, and one the year following. I'm over in Wenham, so presumably Bucher. My question is, I appreciate the conversation about how, there's a process of whittling down to one choice for the community to make, and if that choice is some subset of a full comprehension of all the elementary kids across both Hamilton and Wenham, so there'll be a decision about that. Is there at the same time going to be some sort of recommendation, cost analysis, or whatever about the other school that might be aging or need work or renovation? It feels like at some point there should be a holistic, everybody in the community elementary conversation decision, even if it's not with the context of this MSBA grant or scope, so that a person could say, yes, I want to do this, but we also at some later date want to do this or what have you. And my second more clarifying question is there like a holding period before applying again to MBSA for another scenario if there is a second structural build? Because as I understand it, it's like one building for this ask. Can you apply for another one in another year or two? Because we also have another old elementary school that certainly needs help soon, maybe not as urgently. So those two questions.
Want to take it?
You take it first.
Well, okay. The first question was, does the study include the other elementary schools? Correct? Because once a decision is made for one solution, we would then flip and start analyzing what the cost impacts might be on the other remaining facilities. Under the MSBA guidelines, we have very prescriptive areas that we need to study. The area of focus is the Cutler and the Fort Gray configurations. So it does not include looking at those other facilities.
So you're going to ask the community to vote before you do that, or not? That's what I'm asking.
Well, I guess we say, we're not, it's not part of our scope. It's not part of the MSBA's, what they accepted us into the program. They didn't accept us to analyze all the other, what the cost would be to renovate them. We don't even know what you'd renovate them to. We are certainly here and will assist Eric and his team, and Tom, any way we can with, maybe big picture cost and things. We're not going to walk away from the question or helping them, but it's not part of our eligibility right now with the MSBA. The second part about applying again, you can certainly apply again to the MSBA, and I'd ask you to just look around your neighboring communities, look at how long it took you to get accepted. Their SOI process is once a year. You find out the following year, that's 2 years. Then you have up to a 6-month eligibility period, 2.5 to 3 years at a minimum. And again, look to your surrounding communities that may have had a failed vote or have been applied for years for a second school. And I can tell you it's not 2-3 years. It's more likely 8, 10 plus. There's not a lot of.
That's part of the communication thread to the town, so people understand that.
Yeah.
That's my point. I think those are relevant.
I think you look to your neighbors at Manchester Essex, because Manchester Essex Memorial School, I believe, was invited in eligibility in 2015. The Essex Elementary School was just invited in eligibility in the December board meeting by the MSBA's board meeting. So 7, 8 years.
Boston was 10.
We got one more question back here.
Hi, Erica Mitchell, live in Hamilton. I have 2 kids who also went through Cutler, had a great experience there. They're now older, high school and college. I've heard a lot around town or seen signs about like creating a mega school, and that has a really negative connotation. Mega schools to me are like what my sister's kids are in St. Louis, where they have 8 sections of classes per grade. My younger son, when he's now in 10th grade, when he went through Cutler, they had a bubble year and they had 3 sections of classes, or 3 classes in his grade, which I actually found to be a better experience because they could mix the kids up more, and if there were personalities that didn't do well together in a classroom, it just created more opportunity to separate kids and create more diversity in the groups. So I'm curious, and maybe you don't have it today, but if it's something at some point in time you could share with us with these different scenarios, how many classes per grade we would be looking at, because I do think that contributes to like the community feel of the school. But just to be clear, I'm not against having a larger elementary school. And I also think I appreciate the work we're doing to try to maximize the funding we get from the state. I think that's really important. There's a lot of things that the town needs to spend money on and that have been deferred over the years. And so the more money we can get from the state to help with that process, the better. Thank you.
The current answer to the enrollment question, there are 847 elementary school students now. When you build a new or renovate a school or do something different than what you have, you usually get more excitement and move in, so that number will rise. Right now, we have 7 sections of every grade level across the 3 elementary schools, so 7 first grade, 7 second grade, and along the way. So this next school year will be the first year where we have 7 sections, K to 5, in our district.
It's on. Great.
It's on.
Here we are. Hi, everyone. I just want to kind of piggyback and add a little bit more to what you're saying. And I don't know that you guys are the right people to answer this. I think, quite frankly, it might be about the school team, the school plan. I think where the concern is coming from for me is when I'm looking, you just said there's 847 elementary students that are in pre-K through 5 right now. And a lot of these plans are looking at enrollment for 285, 430, and 645. So that tells me that from an equity standpoint, a majority of our elementary students aren't being included in a majority of these plans that are on this piece of paper. Am I reading this correctly? And so then that means that from the enrollment, no, I'm not done yet. Y'all had hours.
Actually,
But that's part A. Hey, hold it. So that's part A. So part B, so that tells me just that what I'm thinking about is the first slide up there had pictures of Bucher falling apart. There was pictures of Bucher falling apart and the other schools. So if we're going to put our preschool through 2nd, I think the taxpayers deserve to understand the scope and the cost that it's going to take to update the rest of those school buildings. If our kids, I have one of those integrated preschool babies. She's not even close to ready for Bucher, and we'll pray for them when she is. But I've got kids that are going into those other schools, and I've been in education for 14 years, and I am all about updating our schools and not our fire departments any longer. But I want to understand the scope of the whole project beyond just what you guys are talking about in this one building, because I'm thinking about 847 kids in our 3 towns, and it's important to think about the buildings. And so not really necessarily more from my selectmen and the school team, the whole team that's making this decision. Can we understand the cost to update those other buildings that taxpayers are going to pay as part of this, and in the years to come? Because we know that once this is done, what's next?
Thank you. The scenarios really depend, so it depends on what scenario you're looking at. If you're looking at combining grades 1 to 5, or so whatever scenario you're looking at really depends on what works. Some of those scenarios don't work with the grade configuration. You start to say, okay, we're going to build one school and put all the 3 to 5 kids there. I don't have any place to put K1, pre-K, K1, 2. I could put some of them in the Bucher, but then what's my other option? So that's how some of those things will kind of lose their appeal through the process. If you build the single school, 285 kids, In the Cutler, you end up doing K-5 with just the kids that are there, and you might add a couple more classrooms because you have some expandability. You'll have a few more classrooms in that configuration. If you go the other end of the spectrum and you say, okay, we're going to build the 1 to 5 option, the biggest option that's there, you'll end up putting pre-KK. You'll have basically a preschool in the Bucher School. That would be another option, which is one of the reasons we started renovating the gym and started putting some money into the infrastructure in that building, depending on what direction we go in. These guys will not do any estimating of what it would cost to renovate. We would have to go back to town meeting to have a site study done, ask for funding, probably $250,000 plus, to be able to have a company come in and do all the cost estimating across the other buildings. So it's doable, and we can bring that forward and see if this, if
That's just like, that's the reality, because Bucher needs to be updated if we choose to have these
Yeah.
things. And
Yeah.
so I think it's just thinking about like, that is an additional expense that we're gonna have to pay for at some point.
Right.
Right.
Right, agreed. Yeah, all 3 schools are, you can go to the high school. The high school needs to be renovated too. The high school is in awful shape. It's like there are rivers running through it today. I'm gonna go back to Lori first, and then I'll come back after that.
As a 30-some-year resident and kids that went from preschool through, one that's back here living in town, I just want to ask, I think this building in the 90s was our last MSBA project. And through the years, and I've been involved with different things in town government, we keep trying to put in for a project, and we don't get it. And this is the first time since the middle school that we have this opportunity. So to think about just doing one school and having 2 other schools that aren't equal, and thinking that we're going to renovate them is not going to happen in the near future, or at least while some of your children are in school. So why I'm interested with this is I just think whatever we do is that it's equitable in some way. So if it's putting the same grades in one school, that to me is more equitable than having, 2 schools not brought up and one school being renovated. Because we want to have all of our kids have the same experience in the district.
Anna?
Thank you, everybody. First of all, I just want to say thank you to the team and all the hours and hours of time that you've put into this to put together materials that are actually fairly readable. There's a lot of detail, but I just want to acknowledge the level of professionalism and expertise that we're being presented with. I want to pick up a little bit on what Lori just said and sort of be practical in some way and make a suggestion about future presentations or the website. There's a lot of comments here and online, and when I was on the school committee up until last year, people acting surprised, like, I've never heard of this before, I can't believe this is happening. I feel blindsided by this information, and as someone who has been engaged heavily, I've never quite understood how that happens, but it's happening. Like, this room is case in point. It is happening, so instead of judging it, let's just say, okay, how can we remind people that these conversations have actually been happening at a town level for a very long time, trying to get the schools in? And the sort of question about what about Bucher, when I first started hearing about the schools project, that was part of it, and the submissions by the school committee over the years have been very exhaustive to try to figure out what can we as a town get funded, because this is sort of going back to what Lori was talking about, which is we have to sort of be realistic about what we, the combined communities of Hamilton and Wenham, with our 13,000 people rubbed together, can get funded through town meeting, which is the most bizarre form of government I've ever seen in my life. So as much as I, as a parent, and I'm a parent, my kids both went through Cutler, and I appreciated the clever use of duct tape and aluminum foil like everyone else, there's a certain point where you have to say, what can we get funded, which involves all the taxpayers? What can we get through town meeting? And to Laura's point, like, we're not going to get multiple swings at the apple, and we actually don't have sufficient revenue, even if we wanted to, in terms of our levy limits to do it. Like, we have to be very strategic right now about, are we gonna get anything or are we gonna get nothing? And we, as school voters, much maligned by non-school voters, need to recognize we're all part of the same community, and if you want anything to pass, it has to get through town meeting, and that means you have to get people on board for the totality of needs across the district. And I think for me personally, a helpful data point that historically puts everything in context, put the initial building dates of all the schools and see that fundamentally the district we know was built in the post-World War II era, where life was different, costs were different, construction was different, schools were different. And unfortunately for us, we have 4 out of 5 schools that were all built before 1955. And they're all failing, they all need work, and honestly, like, we have to figure out how are we gonna pay for that. So I think, I applaud the work you've done, but I think you need to add history so people can refer to it. And then for all people who are listening or watching who think, this is new, I can't believe it's happening, check that feeling and look at the website carefully, because if you guys put the history there, it will help explain why the approaches are being made the way they are, strategically.
Thank you. One of the things my friend Nick here always says is we got to get out there. We got to get more information out there. And I think that's one of the conversations we constantly have. How do we get out there? How do we get more information, share more information? We even talked about putting flyers in water bills, which we've learned is not legal. So we're like, everybody's paying a water bill, right? So we're trying to find legal ways to get the information out there so that people can come to these events and learn more, tell us their feelings so that we can record them and bring those back to the group. And it's really this ongoing collection of information right now where we're really trying to build a base for us to make a good quality long-term decision for the district. Let me just let her go first because she hasn't gone at all. Thanks.
I'm Megan. I live in Hamilton. I have one child in Winthrop and one in a few years. I actually come from the construction world, so I have a couple kind of feedback comments, clarifications. So a lot of things that we've talked about was LEED. For residents, just so everyone understands, Mass Energy Code is very strict and very progressive. So when you hear the word LEED, don't think dollars. Typically a project could be LEED certified up to silver without having much project budget impact. So I think we all need to kind of keep that in mind of finding that happy medium. To some of the points that just got brought up by some of our other parents, this sheet with schools in scope, given that the total budget or project costs anticipated actually does not include the work that needs to be done in those schools for bringing them into the grade levels that they're going to be done or renovations that need to happen, I think that needs to come off because it looks like we're touching all the schools that are listed under scope. So that's a big communication. Maybe adding something at the bottom that says, you know, this plan will impact, not cut in this budget. It's very clear that we all agree that we need to look at that. We need to do the study, but obviously it's not in your budget and not in your scope. So I think that's something we have to go to the town on. One of my questions is, has a energy consultant gotten brought in, such as Train, to do a comprehensive study of all the school buildings thus far?
That's a district question. It's not as part of this.
As part of this project, yeah.
I don't know if Tom has done one in the past.
I can answer that. 2008 comprehensive facility audit was done. Doran Whittier. 2012, Doran Whittier performed another one. 2016, a facilities master plan constructed by SMMA Architects. All of those studies yielded major changes in the district.
So I know specifically, just because I have dealt with this a lot, is that Train will come into a district and do an energy analysis study, especially with so many of our equipment aging out. There are so many federal incentives right now, especially through COVID, that have increased. So it may be something that we need to look into again, not just for this project, but how it impacts and saves us on the other projects that are forthcoming because of this project. And then, I know there was one other, but I can't remember it off the top. Oh, case studies. I know you keep mentioning Manchester, so to timeline it, if Manchester construction started in 2019 and they were approved in 2015, that means we're looking at a 12-year cost impact or change in cost, or 8 years. So most of us didn't even have kids at that age, at that time. So knowing that construction cost has increased 37% since COVID, we can't use Manchester. Regardless of programming, cost it's not possible. Do you have other schools that may not be under construction but are further along in the process that we can cost compare case studies and things like that we can put on the site? Because I think that will really help.
We have a great interactive slide from the MSBA that we're going to consult into our. This is what we want to hear. The question and answer, these are great ideas. And I have a chart in mind that the MSBA updates regularly on actual costs, has the date when they were accepted in the program, it has the lines you can normalize. I think we're going to find a way to put that into our presentation. That's a great idea.
Thank you.
And I appreciate your comment. Can I ask a question before the next question comes on? Because people start to leave.
Go.
How did you find out about this meeting? Because as a design team and OPM team, we were up here, we said, what's the over and under, and how many people show up the first night? You guys blew the over, it's the over, you guys won. So, no, I'm serious, you blow it away. How'd you find out?
Facebook, email.
Facebook, email?
Nobody saw the big white sign in front of the truck.
You guys know about Mother's Club?
Yes.
Well, I haven't gone to Mother's Club.
Yeah.
Little as kids
Yeah.
will be impacted by this. We need to make a rounds with the Mother's Club because they're the ones who got a little.
They've been putting it out for us on their social media.
We posted an email today.
Can you send flyers to every kid? Like, every kid.
What's funny is every single parent gets a weekly from me that has all that information in it.
There's a lot of information.
There is a lot of information there. It's purposeful. That's why I keep putting it in there. But I mean, we could. Yeah, absolutely. My kid's bag, I would have had to take out 3 years worth of stuff first before I brought it. Go ahead, Francesca.
Yeah, I just wanted, I still think that Manchester is a very, very current good example because of the timeline that you have just said to us. It was built in 2019, so not in 1882. And the other comment too, somebody else talked about funding and was very concerned about getting funding from the MSBA. I don't think it's an easy thing, but I just wanted to say as like a little sort of hopeful, positive, recent news on that. So Manchester, after having redone with MSBA funding the Memorial Elementary School, 6 years later was accepted for the same process by the MSBA to renovate their second elementary school because they decided to, instead of consolidating them, to keep them separate. So hopefully that's good news. Yeah, so
sometimes it takes a long time, so I just wanted to
Right.
share that.
So, yeah, absolutely. But hopefully it seems like things are hopefully going in a different direction, reimbursement rates are higher.
The MSBA is starting to actually, their funding is based in the law. It's $800 million a year, and there are now things happening in the State House to improve that number so that they can offer more projects because of the realities of what we're seeing with cost escalation. And that's part of, somebody asked me in the FinCom earlier today, if we built one of the schools now in 8 years, what's the other one going to cost? None of us could come up with that number, take 37% and add it on there. Who knows? It could be less. So it's really a crapshoot. We don't want to put false information out there for people.
And then a second comment, I hear a lot about equality and all that, and I think, those are great points, but I think those need to be looked at a larger sort of level, like school committee level. What are we thinking about the next 20 years? How do we plan this in a way that's smart and fiscally responsible and that makes everybody as happy as possible? think that's the way to look at it. Trying to kind of cram it into one opportunity and be so short-sighted, you can really regret that.
Thank you. We're gonna,
I have a
go
question.
ahead, all right. Beth, I will bring the mic back here. Been very patient.
I know there's been a couple of different towns that have recently voted down their school projects because of funding, so I think it's super important. I think Anna was talking about that, it's super important to make sure we have buy-in. I think it's really important to reach out to the taxpayers and not just people who have kids in the system. And so I don't know how we reach out to all taxpayers, but I think we have an obligation, because otherwise we go through this whole process, choose a project, and have it voted down at town meeting. Another issue is I was driving down Asbury one day during pickup. It was a rainy day in December. There were cars pulled over on both sides of the road, and people in the lane going towards Highland. So you have one lane to get through. And obviously, depending on what the project is, it's going to be 2 to 3 times the parking you're going to need as well for the staff and teachers. So I don't know if those things have been considered.
Yeah, the parking gets considered on the way in the project process, depending on what you build. You build a smaller school, you have smaller parking, so.
And is that total cost, is the cost you saw total, or are there other things like excavation costs?
No, those are built in, excavation costs are built in.
Everything, there's nothing else we're gonna find out, okay.
No major surprises. The last project I actually looked at, that some of these team members were involved in, actually came in under budget after all was said and done, which is a goal of ours as well, but we also want to be realistic in which direction we take in the 15, we still don't know yet. So.
Thank you.
All right, thank you everybody. Thank you to the team up here. Thank you for coming. Spread the word. Come back on next Wednesday if you want. We'll do this again. We'll try and do it in maybe a different order.